They promised engines that would outlast the road itself, but under that steel and shine, something was quietly dying. Now an $888 million fallout has cracked open GM's biggest secret, and the truth runs far deeper than anyone imagined. For decades, GM ruled American roads. The Silverado, Sierra, Tahoe, and Yukon weren't just vehicles, they were symbols of power and dependability. By 2014, more than 5 million V8-powered trucks and SUVs rolled out of GM's plants, carrying the promise of strength and long-lasting performance. At the heart of these machines were GM's proud creations, the Ecotec 3 engines, including the 5.3-liter L83 and 6.2-liter L86, L87 V8s. These weren't old-school gas guzzlers. They came with cutting-edge tech like active fuel management and dynamic fuel management, systems designed to shut down half the cylinders during light driving to save fuel. On paper, it was the perfect blend, big power with better efficiency. In reality, it became one of GM's most expensive lessons. To squeeze out those savings, engineers used thinner oils, smaller components, and delicate lifter systems that demanded near-perfect conditions to survive. And when those conditions weren't met, engines that once stood for reliability began breaking down, not after decades, but sometimes within 60,000 miles. When technology meant to save fuel starts destroying the very heart of the engine, something is seriously wrong. By 2016, small-town garages and repair shops across America began seeing something strange. Trucks that were supposed to be bulletproof were limping in with the same haunting symptoms: a ticking under the hood, a check engine light, and a worried owner standing beside it. These weren't old workhorses on their last legs. They were late-model Silverados, Sierras, Tahoes, and Yukons, many with fewer than 70,000 miles. What began as a few unlucky cases soon turned into a pattern no one could ignore. Engines were losing compression, and when mechanics tore them down, the cause was almost always the same: collapsed lifters and bent push rods inside GM's celebrated Ecotec 3 V8 engines. These were the 5.3-liter and 6.2-liter power plants GM had proudly marketed as smarter, stronger, and more efficient. But behind that promise was a fatal flaw. The engines used GM's advanced active fuel management and later dynamic fuel management systems, technology designed to save fuel by shutting off half the cylinders during light driving. On paper, it was an innovation. In practice, it became a mechanical time bomb. Owners started hearing the faint tapping that technicians soon called the GM tick. For some, it appeared at 40,000 miles. For others, just after the warranty ended. Once a lifter failed, valves stopped moving correctly, and the engine destroyed itself from within. Repair bills ranged from $5,000 to $8,000, and dealerships were packed with the same story: low miles, ticking sounds, full rebuild needed. Forums exploded with complaints. One owner wrote, "My 5.3-liter died at 68,000 miles. Dealers say it's a known issue but no recall. I'm out 6,400. Another posted. The tick started small, then one day it sounded like marbles in a can, engine toast. By 2018, shops had given it a nickname: the GM lifter plague. Photos of disassembled engines spread across forums and Facebook groups. Lifters crushed inward, cam lobes shredded, oil passages clogged with debris. Independent mechanics from Texas to Michigan were all seeing the same thing. Yet GM's public stance stayed quiet. Instead of recalls, they issued technical service bulletins, silent instructions to replace parts, reflash software, and send customers home with a pat on the back. But inside GM, not everyone was silent. According to allegations later raised in class action lawsuits, engineers had raised red flags years earlier, warning that the lifter design was fragile and vulnerable to oil starvation, especially with the thinner oils needed for fuel efficiency. It was a trade-off between innovation and reliability, and GM had bet on innovation. But when the engines began failing in waves, that gamble backfired. By 2019, social media was filled with the sound of frustration. Videos of idling trucks ticking loudly, mechanics showing metal shavings and ruined camshafts on YouTube, What began as whispers in small-town garages had grown into a national outcry. And through it all, GM stayed silent. The problem begins deep inside the valve train, where the active fuel management and later dynamic fuel management systems control how many cylinders fire at a given moment. In simpler terms, the lifters inside the engine are built with tiny internal mechanisms, hydraulic pins that collapse when the computer decides to deactivate a cylinder. It's brilliant when it works, but when it doesn't, the results are catastrophic. When one of these lifters collapses prematurely, which hundreds of reports suggest happens between 60 and 90,000 miles, it stops the valve from opening. At thousands of rotations per minute, the camshaft encounters resistance out of nowhere. In a matter of seconds, both the lifter face and the hardened steel lobe are worn down by the grinding action. Then tiny metal fragments break out and fall into the oil. And because the oil circulates through every part of the engine, that debris spreads like poison through the system, damaging bearings, journals, and timing components along the way. It's a chain reaction that almost always ends the same way: complete engine failure. Mechanics who've seen it firsthand describe the damage as surgical-level destruction. One veteran technician told Automotive News, "Once a lifter collapses, it's game over. You're not saving that engine." GM's 5.3 and 6.2 V8 engines are the main offenders. Both were marketed as lighter, more efficient evolutions of GM's legendary small block heritage. But the pursuit of better fuel economy came at a cost. Thinner oil passages, tighter tolerances, and a greater reliance on computer-controlled hydraulics. Even a brief moment of oil starvation or a faulty solenoid could trigger a domino effect that destroyed the entire valve train. Details from class action lawsuits filed in 2023 and 2024 state that during the validation phase, GM engineers apparently raised concerns over DFM reliability. According to court documents, one internal note stated that DFM lifter collapse rate exceeds acceptable threshold under extended idle and temperature cycling. Nevertheless, EPA targets and competitive pressure to match Ford's fuel-saving technology propelled production forward. Ironically, Ford faced a similar engineering challenge with its cylinder deactivation system. But instead of relying on complex mechanical lifters, Ford's design focused on electronic valve control and conservative oiling strategies. While not perfect, Ford's approach avoided the widespread mechanical failures that would later haunt GM. Meanwhile, the human side of the story unfolded quietly on highways and in driveways across America. Families on road trips stranded on the shoulder with their SUVs coughing out metallic rattles. Small business owners watching their $60,000 work trucks fail before hitting 80,000 miles. Delivery drivers are forced to replace engines that cost more than they earned in a month. This wasn't a fluke or a few bad batches. The same pattern repeated over and over. Lifters collapsing, engines seizing, owners footing the bill. As one former GM engineer reportedly said during a deposition, "This wasn't bad luck. It was engineered fragility disguised as innovation." Behind closed doors in Detroit, what began as faint murmurs of concern had become blaring alarms, red flags stamped across internal reports. According to lawsuit filings, GM engineers had been tracking lifter failures since 2016. They saw the numbers climb, failures happening several times more than acceptable. By 2018, the data made it undeniable. This wasn't bad luck, it was a systematic flaw. But instead of coming clean, GM chose containment over correction. A recall would have cost hundreds of millions and stained the brand's image of reliability. So the company took the quieter route, issuing technical service bulletins and customer satisfaction programs. Dealers were told to fix engines only if customers complained loud enough. No recall, no headlines, just silent repairs. Many owners never knew the truth, unknowingly exchanging their quiet for a check. Others even signed non-disclosure agreements to receive partial compensation. Although GM appeared responsive on paper, it was managing optics rather than finding solutions. GM executives allegedly discussed ways to minimize recall exposure and corporate code for keep it quiet, according to internal papers referenced in class action lawsuits. They avoided complete accountability by categorizing the problem as a limited field condition, rather than a defect. It was strategic, cold, and deeply familiar. Because the GM had been here before. The ignition switch scandal, a 57-cent part that caused over 120 deaths, had once brought global outrage and congressional hearings. Investigations revealed the company knew for years and said nothing. And now history was repeating itself. The same silence, the same instinct to protect profits over people. Even as lifter failures plagued newer models, GM stuck to its script, calling them isolated incidents and routine maintenance issues. Meanwhile, online forums filled with videos of ticking engines, shattered parts, and furious owners demanding answers. Inside dealerships, frustration boiled over. One mechanic told car and driver, "We were replacing engines left and right, and GM kept telling us to treat each as a separate case. Everyone knew it wasn't just bad luck." When lawsuits piled up and the media began digging deeper, GM's statements stayed robotic. Customer satisfaction remains our top priority. For many, it sounded hollow, because this wasn't just about engines or lifters. It was about a pattern, one stretching from the factory floor to the executive suite, a pattern of denial, deflection, and deception. GM built its empire on trust, from families, small business owners, and loyal buyers who believed in American craftsmanship. But when the engines failed, that trust cracked faster than the lifters themselves. It wasn't just a mechanical failure, it was a moral failure. And, as the walls of GM's silence grew thicker, one question refused to fade. How many failures does it take to stop being a mistake and start being a crime? When public pressure began to mount and lawsuits started gaining traction, GM needed a response, or at least the appearance of one. In 2020, the company announced a redesigned lifter, promising that the new generation of AFM and DFM components had resolved the issue once and for all. Service bulletins quietly assured dealers that these upgrade parts had been tested for long-term reliability. It sounded like progress. But as mechanics soon discovered, the so-called fix was more illusion than solution. Within months, the same ticking noise that haunted thousands of engines began to return, this time in vehicles supposedly repaired with the updated lifters. Forums once again filled with frustrated owners. "Just had my 2021 Yukon repaired last year, ticking's back already." Another wrote, "GM said the new design solved it. Guess what? It didn't." Dealers were left caught in the middle. Many service departments received internal instructions advising them to perform preventative measures rather than replacements. Oil flushes, ECU programming, or software updates all meant to stabilize lifter operation. But these steps didn't address the root cause, a mechanical flaw baked into the engine's DNA. In several documented cases, warranty repairs reused the same parts number, meaning that new engines were fitted with the very lifters that had already failed in earlier versions. One mechanic summarized it bluntly: "We're swapping bad parts for bad parts and pretending it's fixed." By 2021, GM's internal warranty costs had climbed sharply, especially for trucks and SUVs powered by the 5.3-liter and 6.2-liter engines. Analysts estimated that the company spent tens of millions annually addressing lifter-related complaints, a financial bandage over a wound that kept reopening. Instead of acknowledging the scale of the problem, GM doubled down on its public messaging, emphasizing routine maintenance and owner care as key to longevity. Owners, however, had little reason to believe it. Many reported multiple engine replacements under warranty, only to face the same failure less than 20,000 miles later. For some, the ticking became a kind of countdown, a reminder that another breakdown was inevitable. Visually, the illusion was perfect. The recall that never was, the redesign that never worked, the apology that never arrived. For thousands of GM owners, the breakdown wasn't just mechanical, it was emotional, financial, and deeply personal. They believed in American reliability, in a brand that promised endurance. But when their engines failed, the system meant to protect them failed too. Most trucks and SUVs came with a 5-year, 60,000-mile powertrain warranty, a supposed safety net. The cruel twist? Lifter failures began appearing right after that limit, between 65,000 and 90,000 miles. Not a coincidence, just perfect timed devastation. At dealerships, owners described the same symptoms: ticking noises, loss of power, sudden stalls, and they heard the same rehearsed replies. Normal wear and tear. Probably the wrong oil. We can't verify a defect. Each phrase is carefully designed to shift blame away from GM and onto the customer. One 2018 Silverado owner said, "The service manager told me my oil looked dark, so it must have been my fault. They quoted $8,000 for a new engine at 72,000 miles. Another recalled. My truck died on a family trip. GM said it was out of warranty. We had to tow it 200 miles home. The pattern was unmistakable. Repair, failure, denial, repeat. Forums became therapy sessions filled with exhausted posts. How can this still be happening? They said it was fixed." One user wrote, "I've replaced my engine twice. GM doesn't care. They just passed the bill to us." Class action lawsuits gave their anger structure. Owners described engines dying just after warranties expired, while customer care lines offered nothing but scripted apologies. The fallout went far beyond money. Families lost transportation, small businesses lost contracts, delivery drivers missed payments on trucks they couldn't drive. Visually picture it. A family stranded on the roadside beside their once trusted SUV. A tow truck hauling another Silverado into the dark. The driver on hold for hours as an automated voice repeats, "Your call is important to us." Each image tells the same story. A company that built engines to fail, and warranties too weak to save the people who believed in them. Because when the safety net is woven from corporate red tape, it's always the customer who falls through. By 2023, what began as scattered complaints from frustrated truck owners had erupted into a full-blown legal firestorm. Law firms nationwide began linking the same eerie symptoms: collapsed lifters, seized camshafts, ticking engines, and abrupt power outages, to the same defective heart: GM's Ecotec 3 V8 engines. The first significant setback occurred when owners of cars with the 5.3-liter and 6.2-liter engines were represented in a class action lawsuit brought by Hagens Berman, a company renowned for taking on corporate behemoths. The case alleged that GM knowingly sold vehicles with defective lifter systems and concealed the risk of premature failure from consumers. Soon after, other companies filed comparable lawsuits in several states, including California, Texas, and Michigan, each of which contributed to the mounting body of evidence. The Chevrolet Silverado, GMC Sierra, Tahoe, Yukon, Suburban, and the Escalade were among the hundreds of thousands of impacted cars listed in court documents by 2024. Owners from all over the nation came forward with similar tales of engines failing soon after warranties ended, ticking noises and dealership runarounds. In one filing from the GM L87 engine class lawsuit, plaintiffs accused the automaker of knowingly concealing a systematic defect in the dynamic fuel management system that causes lifter collapse and catastrophic engine failure. Internal emails cited in the case suggested that engineers had raised concerns during the validation phase, but were overruled due to cost and production deadlines. Then came the number that changed everything: $888 million. That figure, a combination of potential settlements, factory retooling, extended warranty programs, and legal costs, represented one of GM's largest single financial exposures since the ignition switch crisis. While GM never publicly admitted wrongdoing, the sheer scale of the financial response spoke volumes. In court, GM maintained its stance. Only a small number of vehicles were affected, and we continue to work with customers to ensure satisfaction. The statement was meant to reassure, but it only fueled more outrage. Thousands of pages of service records, warranty claims, and customer complaints told a very different story, one of widespread failure. According to case filings, internal data revealed failure rates far higher than the company admitted publicly, particularly among 2019 to 2022 models using the L87 engine. Technicians from dealerships testified that they had replaced dozens of engines each month, often under internal special coverage. Directives that GM avoided labeling as recalls. Lawyers claimed that GM's behavior in multiple cases adhered to a well-known corporate tactic: minimize the seriousness, postpone taking accountability, and quietly reach a settlement once the harm is evident. Headlines read, GM faces nearly $1 billion fallout over engine defects. Lifter lawsuits expose deep cracks in GM's reliability claims. Owner says GM sold them time bombs on wheels. The public narrative shifted from inconvenience to betrayal. For years, customers had been told their engines were fine. Now those same engines had become evidence in a nationwide class action battle. As one attorney put it during a 2024 hearing, if this was just a minor defect, why did it take nearly $1 billion to contain? The question still hangs in the air, a reminder that the real cost of failure isn't always paid in dollars. It's occasionally paid in trust that is irreversible. The human cost of GM's engine issues is most evident in everyday life. Outside of courts and court documents, a small construction business in Texas lost 2 work trucks in the same month. The downtime cost them contracts, fuel reimbursements, and weeks of missed income. We bought GM because we trusted the brand, the owner said. Now we're renting trucks just to stay afloat. In Michigan, a single mother described being stranded on a dark rural highway after her 2020 Tahoe suddenly lost power. The engine just died. My kids were in the back seat. I called roadside assistance, but they couldn't get to us for hours. Even mechanics felt the impact. One dealership technician admitted, "It's hard explaining to a loyal customer that their new engine failed again. They look at you like you're lying, and honestly, I don't blame them." Financially, the ripple effects were massive. After fault reports emerged, used truck values for the impacted models fell precipitously. In a single year, some models lost 10 to 15% of their resale value. Many failures were classified as mechanical issues rather than the accidents, which complicated insurance claims and made it necessary for owners to pay for replacement parts. Many families were forced into debt as repair payments were stacked on top of rental and towing costs. Because an engine failure can ruin your life in addition to stopping your car. The consequences of GM's lifter dilemma spread throughout the whole automotive industry, not just to the factory gates. As consumer confidence in GM started to decline, rivals quickly took advantage of the situation. Ford, Toyota, and Dodge all ran sophisticated, understated advertising efforts centered around the phrase reliability. Ford reinforced its long-standing "built tough" tagline by airing ads that featured trucks navigating difficult terrain without faltering. Dodge focused on the unadulterated mechanical dependability of their Hemi engines, whereas Toyota followed with advertisements emphasizing long-term customer pleasure and resale value. Each campaign carried an unspoken jab. We don't fail where GM did. Meanwhile, GM found itself in a public relations chokehold. The company tried to raise awareness of its electric future by emphasizing innovation, sustainability, and next-generation technologies. However, that statement ran afoul of continuing legal disputes and irate clients who were still awaiting resolutions regarding their malfunctioning engines. The optics were impossible to ignore on one side. GM promoted a clean, futuristic image. On the other, drivers were posting photos of lifters, oil leaks, and dead engines on social media. The brand that once symbolized American strength was now fighting to defend its reputation. And one industry expert summed it up perfectly. In the era where trust is worth more than torque, GM's engines broke more than parts, they broke faith. In May 2025, GM made a bold announcement, an $888 million investment into its Tonawanda engine plant in New York. Officially, it was described as a move forward, the next generation of small block engines, a major step in developing the Gen 6 powertrain. Press releases painted it as a story of innovation and progress, a renewed commitment to reliability, performance, and American jobs. But the timing raised eyebrows. After years of customer complaints, class action lawsuits, and public backlash, the question almost asked itself, is this a step forward or a cleanup mission? The upgrades themselves sounded impressive. New precision machine systems, cleaner production lines, stricter inline testing, even AI-driven quality monitoring. designed to catch mechanical flaws before they left the assembly line. On paper, it all looked like progress, but for thousands of frustrated owners still paying off failed engines, the announcement felt less like redemption and more like damage control. For GM, it was a reinvestment in the future. For owners, it was proof the past hadn't been forgiven, just rebranded. This isn't just a story about engines failing. It's a warning to every driver who trusts a company's promise of reliability. If you own a Chevrolet, GMC, or Cadillac equipped with a 5.3-liter, 6.2-liter, or L87 V8 engine, the first thing you do is check your VIN. Visit GM's official recall or service bulletin website, or use the NHTSA VIN lookup tool. If your vehicle has open service bulletins or coverage programs, take them seriously. Even if the engine sounds perfectly fine now, the defect doesn't announce itself until it's too late. The earliest warning signs are subtle: a faint ticking noise that starts at idle, oil pressure that occasionally dips lower than normal, or slight vibrations caused by cylinder misfires. Many drivers ignored these symptoms, believing they were harmless. But these were the signs of lifters beginning to collapse, cam lobes wearing down, and the first stages of total engine failure. Documentation becomes your best defense. Keep every service receipt, note every oil change, and make sure dealerships' visits are logged. When engines fail, manufacturers often fall back on the same excuses: improper maintenance, owner neglect, or normal wear. Without proof, those words can cost thousands. If your warranty claim is denied, don't stop there. File a formal complaint with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Every report matters. It builds a public record that forces accountability. Consumers have more power than they realize. Automakers rely on silence, on people giving up and paying out of pocket. However, that silence ends as soon as you report, record, and escalate. Your signature on a purchase contract doesn't end your rights. It begins them. Without honesty, innovation is meaningless. Instead of engines failing, confidence dies when companies conceal their mistakes. The GM lifter incident highlights a broader flaw in modern industry, a cycle in which innovation is rushed, problems are hidden, and consumers are left to pay the price. It's the same pattern we've seen time and time again: profit first, accountability later. GM isn't the only one caught in this loop. Boeing faced it when cracks in the corporate culture led to 2 deadly 737 MAX crashes. Tesla has battled lawsuits over autopilot malfunctions. Toyota once struggled to regain public confidence after its acceleration scandal. Different businesses, different devices, but the same fundamental problem. The human cost is the one that persists the longest when technology fails. Every company faces moments of reckoning. What separates the honorable from the deceptive isn't whether mistakes are made, but how they're handled. Do they confront the truth or bury it under PR statements and technical jargon? The GM case forces us to ask a bigger question. What happens when the world's most trusted brands start treating reliability as optional? When innovation becomes a disguise for planned obsolescence? Every company faces failure, but once some choose truth over damage control, $888 million might rebuild a factory, but can it rebuild trust? If you want more stories that expose the truth behind the machines we trust, hit subscribe now.